Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3. It's been a busy few days. I've been doing my core exercises like a good boy. I've been getting out training. I've done my power test and watched an amazing European Championships. The women's race was absolutely enthralling and the under-23 race was great too, not just because Thomas Main got a fantastic second and Cameron Mason third. Now, Cameron Mason is going to be on the line in just a second. Had a really good chat with him. We spoke for a little while, so I'm going to post the whole interview as a separate feed and have cut it down a little bit to make this show a bit more digestible. Stay with us after the interview with Cameron Mason because we're going to do some skills as well, building on what we did in episode 2 and being a little bit inspired by some of the stuff that Cameron said. So, without further ado, roll the interview.
How's it going?
Hi there. You all right? Thanks for joining us.
No worries, no worries.
That's
Good
amazing.
to see
So, where are you? You're in the Netherlands, doing amazing stuff at the weekend. Are you now in quarantine?
you. No, I'm in Belgium now, so I've been out here for the last few weeks, and that's where I'm going to be all winter, really. So I went from the Netherlands back to Belgium, and there's no quarantine between those countries.
So I suppose big gatherings are cancelled for Christmas anyway. So
yeah, it's gonna be a bit different. Yeah, like I'm not going to see my mum and dad for a good 4 or 5 months because just with the quarantine issue. As soon as I go home, that's it. 2 weeks, you've got to quarantine, and as soon as they come out, it's the same thing. So, it'll be a bit different at Christmas. Like I had Christmas at home last year, so it'll be a bit different.
okay. Well, that's not great, but cyclocross is good. So at least you can get the best out of it.
Oh
so,
yeah, I'm not complaining at all.
Yeah. You've been gradually working your way through the ranks, but suddenly you seem to me, take a big leap forward at the Koppenbergcross this year. And in every lap, we could see your head bobbing up the hill while the camera's still on it. And the camera only ever follows the people at the front of a race. So for in the Koppenbergcross, you could be on the telly the whole way. I mean, that was absolutely amazing. And as I could see you there, we're going, oh, he's ahead of Tom Newson. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, the Koppenberg is tough, isn't it? And at the very beginning, you could see Felipe Orts was on the front going up there, and we thought, well, we're not going to see a lot of him later in the race then. It just blows you away, doesn't it? And those last couple of laps, it looked like they were tough.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience of, and I've never raced it before, and now I know that it's a pretty unrelenting course. As soon as you go into the red, there's just no time to recover. So on a course, actually comparing it, I've only done 2 cross races this season, but comparing it to Europeans was almost the exact opposite. You needed to push against the course to actually make progress, whereas at Koppenberg, everything is against you. The terrain, the wind, the climbing, everything. You have to take it and then give some. That was basically the story. I didn't pace it quite right and then paid for it quite a lot. I think if I'd done that at Europeans, you wouldn't have seen quite as big of an explosion because you can technically kind of ride around a flat course. Whereas just riding around Koppenberg, it takes a huge amount of effort.
I mean, I think people think it's the Koppenberg, that's really hard, but that's just half the story, isn't it? There's nowhere to recover. And we don't have a lot of races in the UK are on at sports grounds and parks. But this is just a cow field, and it's so bumpy, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, if there wasn't any poles there, you'd think, why would you race around this? But and almost without the crowds, it makes it quite clinical. Because with the crowds, that's the whole point of Koppenberg. It's this kind of mythical race. But yeah, definitely the Parker makes it. And I was chatting to a friend in the week, and we were saying about how Koppenberg is like a mountain bike race, but less fun. Like it's all suffering and not as much enjoyment, which in itself is its own thing to enjoy, actually.
So okay, but then that was a breakthrough, and then we weren't expecting the next weekend, the European Championships, and absolutely amazing. Third place there. I suppose you're getting fed up. Well, maybe you're not getting fed up with people saying, what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I've chatted to people about it, and Koppenberg is just like everyone's saying that Koppenberg is just an anomaly. Like it's so hard to compare results from Koppenberg to a normal cross race. And so that's kind of what I had in the back of my head. I had good legs at Koppenberg. And yeah, I was getting stuck in, and overall the body felt good. So I knew that, and I was racing with guys that, yeah, I'd taken a step up definitely. So looking at a U23 race only, I had a few names in my head like Pim Ronnar and these guys like Mace Hendrick, mostly the Dutch guys. And so I had some ideas, but there were going into it, I thought there were about maybe 4 or 5 of us who were kind of gunning for that last spot on the podium. And that's the stuff you overthink. But once the racing gets ahead, it doesn't matter who's in the front. It could be Van der Poel, it could be Ryan Camp. You just you do your race as if it's a local league, really. Even though it's got this fancy name, European Champs, once that goes, it all goes out the window. So, yeah, the race just went out well, and the legs kind of delivered, and then I kind of did the rest.
Yeah, well, no, it was an amazing performance, and so we thought you were the fastest over the barriers, maybe the bunny hopping. What I thought was interesting was that the people who were bunny hopping and weren't bunny hopping, just moving briefly into the senior race, Lars van der Haar was the one who was bossing the bunny hops. And Isabit was struggling a bit, and so it was for people watching, it was interesting to see how fast the bunny hops were going. And the other important bit of the course, just from watching it on TV, was the sand. And while you were bossing the bunny hops, it looked as though Thomas May maybe had the legs on you in the sand, and so there was a little bit of toing and froing, and it looked as though you were, although you were gaining time on the bunny hops, he was gaining a bit more on the sand. So you were playing this catch-up game the whole time, and that must have been tough.
That is definitely how it felt in the race. So it's on a course like that with such small margins, as in it's little milliseconds at each corner. So it's really tight racing. The sections where it makes a difference, you feel them. So for example, if you can't ride or run in the sand particularly well, if that turns into 5-10 bike lengths, that can take a whole lap to close. Whereas if you compare that to maybe even a national course like Bradford, you can close 50 meters by getting one section right. The kind of gaps in abilities they're easy to shut. Whereas on a tight course like Europeans, the margins are really fine. And if you have a weakness, then it shows. And yeah, I was just it did feel like that I was on that catch-up game. But then with 2 laps to go, I could I showed that I can also put other people on the back foot, and the tables turned a little bit. But yeah, Thomas was running incredibly strong, and I think there's a little bit of work for me to do in terms of my short running speed, because it was literally 10-15 seconds of really intense running, but you have to really nail it, and that takes its toll really for the next. You have to recover for the next 5 minutes almost from these efforts. Sometimes it's that important.
So I mean, sometimes running is a bit of an add-on to cross riders, but certainly in the women's, we've seen Celine Del Carmen Alvarado won at Rutherford and also the Europeans by attacking on the running in many ways. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that in these really tight races, it can just come down to those few extra strides on the sand.
Yeah. Whereas if you have like a really muddy race, everyone's absolutely blown their doors anyway, so they're all kind of running at the same speed. Whereas these fast, tight races, it makes the difference if you can really have a good run, because those sections are few and far between. There are only 2 sand sections, and those really were making the difference.
So just getting back to the catching up, you were saying, so on a course like this, you wouldn't just lose a bit of ground and then sprint back up to everyone. That wasn't possible. It's you thinking, right, I'll give myself another half lap or so to gradually work your way up.
Yeah, it was. You can kind of gauge it quite well. I don't know, on the courses where you zigzag a lot, you can see your competitors all the time, so you can get an idea of how things are moving. So at one point, Ryan Camp and Pim Ronnar were really pushing on the front, but I could actually see that I was staying the same distance to them. It was the guys in between who were coming back to me. So you can kind of gauge it, and it's lots of little efforts, obviously. So they all add up into this one big race effort. Like the lap was like 7 minutes. And within that, there must have been 30, 40 sprints, which really take its toll. So it is obviously it's a 50-minute long time trial, but with key sections in between.
Going to people who are listening and what they can learn from you, you know, your bunny hopping was sublime, and we've said that it's becoming more and more important in racing. With, you know, Van der Haar has even learnt now.
Yeah.
Is this something I heard actually in Ireland? They don't let young kids bunny hop the barriers in the races. They have marshals there, and they say, no, you've got to get off for that. But from my point of view, you know, should be encouraging people to, you know, be bunny hopping, you know, from an early age. I mean, when did you first start hopping the barriers?
I think, to be honest, it was almost the same. It wasn't encouraged really for me when I was under 12 and stuff, and when I started doing cyclocross racing, they would usually not actually put barriers in, and if they did, yeah, they would discourage bunny hopping. And I think it was in good in there. They had good intentions to make sure that people weren't injuring themselves and using bad technique. And actually, at training sessions with a guy called Keith Stocker, who does all of the kind of Scottish race stuff, yeah, we were definitely told to learn proper running technique before bunny hopping, because whether you're a good bunny hopper or not, you're always going to need to know great dismounting technique and remounting technique, because that happens more in cyclocross than hurdles necessarily. So it was definitely secondary that we learned how to bunny hop. And yeah, it was every year I have to relearn how to bunny hop. The hurdles in at Europeans, that was the first time I bunny hopped for like whatever since February. So in practice, I had to psych myself up, do a few rounds, and I think I did them 6 times in practice, and just session them, because I'd basically lost my confidence over the summer. Because everyone needs to build that up, and you see it at the first race with the pros. You come around on practice, and there's about 15 full-time pro cyclocross riders standing there looking at the barriers going, these look quite big this weekend and stuff like that. It's just because they're out of practice, but come mid-season, everyone's hopping the barriers like they're nothing. So I had to kind of re-get myself. But to be honest, the ones at Europeans were quite good. They were the main thing is the ground was really predictable. It was dead flat, grassy sand. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. It was predictable every lap, no mud, no footprints really. So that makes a big difference to the hurdles.
I mean, it's testament to how ingrained the skill is that you can just rock up at the first race and learn again. I mean, amateurs will be practicing all year and then stuff it up at the first race. So no, it's interesting.
Well, yeah, you want to turn up to the race with some confidence. That's ideal, because there's nothing worse than I watched back my coverage, and there's a Slovakian guy who decks it on the second hurdle, which you never want to do in a race, because it's not good for the confidence. It's like anything. If you mess up a section, it can take a while to get that back. So definitely practicing at home with lots of different sizes, different scenarios, 1 hurdle, 2 hurdles, 3 small hurdles. It's all these things will like build up your kind of bag of tricks for then you need to go in and get out in the race, because there's all these scenarios. Like there's sometimes you hop one and then you have to get off in between. You like anything can happen in the race, so you need to be ready.
Yeah, that's a really good bit of advice. You know, don't just practice exactly the same thing. They say practice makes permanent, and then you won't know how to cope with different situations. Right, so now you've got it all sussed, and you've got your bronze medal. So, you know, that's it now. Pro contract next year. Sven and Bart have been on the phone, have they already?
I wouldn't want to say, but yeah, basically. No, I'm joking.
It's all right. We get it.
Things, I had my recovery spin yesterday, and it's back to normal. It's more for me. It's confidence. It's the next level. But with cycling, there's always the next thing, and that's what makes it. What's addictive about it. There's always a new goal, and that next goal is probably worlds for me. With lots of racing in between, I hope, in Belgium.
What about lockdown? So, you know, if you go on social media, everybody's finding lockdown lovely, and they've decided to buy chickens, and they've rejoined with nature, and they're going on long walks in the autumn and so on. But then there's the other half of people like me who are finding it really difficult. You know, with the lack of racing and uncertainty, and you know, how do you stay focused on your training and things like that? So, I mean, one thing I saw, you've been bike packing. You know, was this good? Is that good training? And how else have you been dealing with lockdown?
Yeah, for the bike packing, I wouldn't technically know it's not good training, but there's more to being a good bike rider than always being good at training. It's about the long term. It's about the mental game and all of that. And in my opinion, bike packing worked for me. It was a way of disconnecting from the racing and from the training and giving that mental break. It definitely wasn't a physical break, which I paid for a little bit, but it's just weighing up what you want to gain from it. And yeah, I know my year was quite strange. I raced all the way up until February, flat out, in cyclocross, and the virus literally didn't affect a single cyclocross race last year, even though it was kind of coming to prominence. I then had my off-season break just as everything went crazy, and then I started my off-season. I guess it wouldn't usually be an off-season, but it was because there was no racing, and I found the kind of lack of distractions really quite productive, because my head was set on the next cyclocross season anyway, and I would just kept telling myself the racing will come back soon. If I can be a better version of myself when that does happen, then that's a big tick in my box. And I managed to tick off lots of exciting things in the summer, even without my normal things like road racing and mountain biking and stuff. So it was just that little shift of goals, really, finding new things to focus on, new things to learn. Like I got a lot out of bettering myself physically this summer, and seeing positive numbers and ticking off big training blocks and stuff. And I got something out of that, but it doesn't have to be as scientific as that. I got just as much enjoyment out of the Capital Trail, which I did was a off-road bikepacking loop that we did in one day. And I can look back on my summer and be really happy that I just went and did that, because it was a really great experience. And there's lots of little wins that you can get. I think that's important with this lockdown is, these big normal goals maybe have been snatched away totally out of our control, but that doesn't stop you using that mental energy for something else, like learning new skills or bettering yourself, doing something that you've wanted to do for a while, like learning to bunny hop, or learning how, like, I'm actually going to fix that little leg that pops up when I remount the bike, because there's so many people who just flick that leg up when they're I don't know, little things like that can just you can look back and go, right, I did something productive.
I suppose for you, you've just because there was an under-23 race at the Europeans, but not a junior race. So you've been in many ways very lucky that you've been able to sort of prove yourself on the world stage. Whereas people who were maybe did a load of training and then were hoping to prove themselves on the national stage, it's not happened for. But then you've given some good advice there about how, you've just got to shift your objectives to doing some massive trail.
And I think, and that uncertainty was always there. Like, as we got closer to the cross season and that second wave was kind of coming, there was that kind of feeling of, oh my goodness, this has been 7 months or 6 months in the making and it might not even happen. And at that point, you have to, control everything you can control. And then after there, then find out what you can focus on next, because it's not very nice getting told that it's the same for everyone, because it's never the same for everyone. It's always your own little thing. And I was chatting to Corin Carrick Anderson, one of the juniors who planned this whole Belgian block, and then it all just kind of fizzles away. And I look back to when a few years ago when I was doing all of that, and it must be incredibly frustrating. But he's also focusing on his next goals. He's moving up to U23. Or he's still got junior next year in mountain bike, and that's something that he can look forward to, and he's already training for that. Not absolutely going all balls out, but it's more mentally just training with a purpose, because the racing will return.
And what about for you? What are your objectives for the rest of the season, assuming that the racing does continue on the
continent? Just take week by week. I think this season is showing that you can't take anything for granted. Hopefully we'll be racing in a few weeks and all of that. I think Belgium are pretty set on putting the races ahead, so that's a positive. And then the next level of that is to build on this momentum. I think we're only 2 races in, which I feel like I've been in Belgium for months already, which I don't know if is a good thing, but I am only 2 races in, so there's a lot more to do, with the goal at the end of the season being world champs, because that is another one that really matters.
So does your training program need to be a bit more agile then? Because you can't bank everything on the world champs, because, the world champs might not happen. Or so are you always thinking, well, next race could be my last race? Or is that not
A
the way?
little bit. Like, I came into the season with a lot better fitness than last year, but it's hard to come into a cyclocross season absolutely pinging because there's just a lot of unknowns. Like, there's still unknowns about getting into each race because of certain restrictions and COVID tests and all of the other factors that aren't normally there. So yeah, with training it can be a little bit hard, but yeah, being flexible and knowing your body and knowing how you will react. I think most of the pro peloton at the moment in World Tour as well, it is a balancing of act of that uncertainty, but then you're also dealing with a physical body that changes. And some people you saw with Van der Poel, those first few races, he was just totally off it. His body just wasn't used to it, and it took him that whole period of racing to really ride into his form. And some people are like that, and then you get some people who are with like Wout van Aert who can just train and get everything out in training and then turn up to race 100%. So yeah, you have to like know your own body and stuff like that. But yeah, it is different, and yeah, week by week, it is week by week and day by day. You can't really put a pin in a calendar and go, right, I'm going to be at 100% form then, because there's a lot that can happen.
Finally, you're in the upper echelons of elite racing now. Do you have a fan club yet?
I do have a fan club, on Twitter and Instagram, I think, and they are very, very supportive. So they're doing their job.
So will they next year be at races with the banners like all the Belgian fan clubs?
I hope so, because then at that point I can say that I've made it. I know, Abby last year, someone brought her a personalized cushion. So that's kind of the level of supporting that can happen, is you get a personalized cushion given to you at the camper. So the passionate people are out there.
Wow. Right. Okay. Well, we'll look you up, and hopefully get an influx of fans from this. But anyway, so yeah, thanks again for chatting. Amazing performance in the European Championships. I'm sure there'll be loads more to come. And yeah, well, good luck. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
So, back in the workshop without the glasses. Cameron mentioned that it's not all about bunny hopping. We have to we have to look after our dismounts and our running and stuff as well. So following on from last episode where we did a standard high-speed dismount into barriers, we're going to have a look at how you might get off your bike if the parkour is slightly more complicated. So I've been back out to the woods with the kids, and we'll have a look at how we got on. We've set up a corner, well, a little sequence of corners, and we think it's fastest to run round these because they're so tight rather than ride round them. And we're just going to have a look at the best way to dismount and run round them. So I'll just play through me getting off the bike, running around the first corner, around the next one, get on the bike, and off I go. Now, that all looked okay, really. Let's just pick up on a couple of things as they happen. Now, different to when we were going through the dismounting for barriers, what I've opted for here, because I'm going downhill, I'm slowing down as I go into this bend, rather than having my hands on the tops, I've got my hands on the hoods so that I can be braking right up until the point where I get off the bike, and even slightly afterwards. So I bring my hand down to the top tube here, so in the same position as before, hand on top tube, but here I've got my hand on the hoods so that I can just feather this brake here. Jump off, hit the ground running. All good so far, but now, at this point here, my weight's starting to move back a little bit. I've got the brakes on with my feet because I'm having to run around this corner here with the bike on my inside, and my balance is just not looking fantastic there. So I'm get around the corner there, and now I'm starting to look a little bit better. This is a good position to be in here. I've got the bike on the outside of me. I'm going to get around this bend, all okay, swinging the bike round, and then I'm going quite slowly here because I'm on the inside of the bend. I'm going to get on, at this point where I've got lots of control, and then I'm off and away. So the main problem we've got here is this point where I'm struggling to get around the bend because I want to be on the inside really and the bike on the outside. So clearly this needs me to be getting off on the other side, which is not my natural side. So let's switch to Douglas to see how he gets on with this bend. Off the bike on the other side, runs around the corner nicely, but then sort of struggles a little bit to get back on around there. Not bad though. So let's have a bit more of a look. So coming into the bend here, he doesn't go for his hand on the top tube. He's keeping his hands on the bars here as he gets off. Well, that's fine in this instance. He's going to be a little bit more unstable, slightly more risky, but as he goes round the bend, he's got much more control of the bike here, really. He can swing the bike round the bend there. Some people might go around here with their hand on the top tube, but I think he can get around there just a little bit quicker with both his hands on the bars in this instance. So he then runs up here, and then he's got to try to get on whilst going around the outside of this bend here, and that's not super easy. So he's gone from running around the inside of this bend here, which is good, to running around the outside of that bend there, which he's kind of struggled with a little bit. So we need to do something about this. So let's skip to Charlie and see what we can do. Okay, coming in pretty hot here. Off he gets, just like Douglas. Round, loops his bike over, jumps back on. Okay, slightly more dynamic camera work here as well. So he's come into the bend here. He's got this nice outside line coming into it as well, you can see. Used in all of the course there. He's unclips, he's off and running. Straight into a really nice big stride here. He's obviously really going for this. And then swings the bike around the outside. And then what he's doing is, if he was a slightly bigger chap, he'd be able to get this bike back and over the other side of him a little bit more easily in a nice swing. But for the little guys, it's not quite so easy to do that swing round. But what he does do is, he ends up being able to run around the inside of this bend here. He may have cheated just a little bit on that. He jumps onto the bike and he's off and on his way. So we'll just watch that through again. So goes in hot, swings the bike round to the other side of him, jumps on and he's away. And he's going to save a lot of time through that bend. Now, notice how he gets on at this point just here. He doesn't run round and get up to speed before he gets on, because he's at the apex of the bend here, at the point where he's running he's slowest. So it's easy to get on the bike at that point. If he runs round and was to get on down here, he'd be going fast, so it'd be more difficult. Whereas he can, once he's got on, he can use this bit of the course here that's going down to gain his speed. And you'll see that if you, for example, watch the European Championships that was on last weekend. The riders will get on almost at a standstill at the top of a bank and then use the bank to get them up to speed afterwards. So there you have it. A little bit easier when you've grown another few inches, but swing the bike round and back on. Let's see how this looks for somebody who's not quite so little. It's a bit easier to swing the bike round and get back on and away. So it does help to be a little bit taller. But notice how there's no panic going through here. If you get the technique right, it's nice and smoothly through. Get back on when you're slow. Clipped in, nice and composed here. Then you can get the power on and pull away from all the people who were panicking and hadn't really practiced this technique. So, don't just practice assuming that the race course is going to be easy. Throw in some turns, some descents, make things difficult for yourself. Think about your lines. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.